Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're peeling back the layers on something that looks pretty serene on the surface,
Mhm.
suburbia.
Right. The quiet streets, those perfect lawns, the white picket fences.
Exactly, that whole idyllic image. But beneath that polished surface, our source material today, suburbia, a battleground of secrets and power. It reveals something totally different.
Yeah, it paints this picture of a really vibrant, complex web of, well, human drama, secrets,
Yeah.
and these constant power struggles.
It's definitely not peaceful, according to this source. It lays it out right from the start, calls it a literal battleground of secrets and power.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is how it just plunges you straight into conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of hints that every little interaction, every relationship, even things that seem totally mundane, they can actually be strategic moves.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really striking way to look at everyday life, isn't it? Exposing all this intense domestic combat, these hidden dynamics playing out.
Absolutely. And for us, as we, guide you through this deep dive, the language used is just incredibly evocative.
Oh, definitely. It gives us these fantastic, really practical examples of how we actually describe these very human conflicts in English. Loads of useful stuff here.
Exactly. So our mission today, it's kind of twofold, and it's really designed for you, the listener.
Hmm.
First, we're going to pull out the most important insights, sometimes pretty surprising ones about, the human condition, social interactions, all happening in this supposedly quiet setting.
Looking beyond the surface, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting at the motivations, maybe some universal truths.
Right. And second, and this is crucial, we're going to use this really rich story to unpack and help you understand a whole treasure trove of genuinely useful English vocabulary and phrases.
Hmm.
We'll show you how these words, these expressions, they don't just bring the drama to life, which they do, but they also give you a much deeper feel for the cultural nuances behind them.
Yeah, it's more than just knowing the definition, isn't it? It's about getting the feeling, the implication, uh, the cultural weight that comes with the words.
Exactly. Think of it like a shortcut. You get informed about some compelling human drama, and you get to master some really impactful language you can actually use confidently.
That's key, I think. Understanding those nuances helps you read between the lines, not just in this story, but, in life, especially with complex relationships and all the conflicts that pop up.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Mm.
So let's jump right in. Let's explore this whole idea of the suburban battleground itself, really unpack these themes of conflict and control.
Okay.
Because the source material, it hits us right away with that big theme.
Yeah.
Suburbia is a battleground, an arena for all forms of domestic combat.
And that framing, it's critical, isn't it? It
Yeah.
completely shifts how you might normally think about home, about family.
Totally.
It suggests that even in these places that look so calm, there are these significant power dynamics, these conflicts constantly bubbling under the surface.
It's a reminder that, human nature, with all its messiness, it doesn't just vanish when you move behind that white picket fence.
Not at all. And the source gets specific. It says, husbands clash with wives, parents cross swords with children.
Okay, let's talk about those phrases. Clash with and cross swords with. When you hear those, what kind of picture does that paint? It's not just a polite disagreement, is it?
Oh, definitely not. Let's break those down because they're incredibly vivid. Clash with. That implies a really strong disagreement. It often ends up in an argument, maybe even a confrontation.
Like a collision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine two forces just hitting each other, maybe with an audible impact. That's the feeling. So if the source says the parents often clashed over discipline, it means they had frequent, intense arguments about raising their kids.
Right. A real head-on thing.
Yeah, a sense of direct opposition, views colliding, friction, discord. It's active. It's more than just different opinions. It's a collision of wills.
Okay, and then cross swords with. That feels even more deliberate.
It absolutely is. It literally makes you think of fencing, right? Two opponents in a direct confrontational battle, usually verbal, each trying to outmaneuver the other.
So more strategic.
Yeah, it implies a strategic, competitive interaction, not just a spontaneous flare-up. So if they cross swords on the best approach to the school play, it means they had a very direct, probably quite vigorous debate about it, each side pushing their case, trying to win the argument.
Like verbal combat.
Precisely. Wit and argument are the weapons.
I can really picture that. And, culturally, these phrases, they say something, don't they, about how conflict, even at home or in the community, it's often framed like a struggle, like a competition. in English-speaking cultures.
That's a great point. It's not just about having different views. It's often about asserting your will, your viewpoint against someone else's.
Like there has to be a winner.
Kind of, yeah. It taps into this cultural tendency to see disagreements, even family ones, as something to be won rather than just resolved. There's often this underlying drive for, well, dominance that these phrases capture perfectly.
And that underlying drive is exactly what the source digs into when it talks about what it calls the bloodiest battles,
Oh, yes.
which often involve women and their mothers-in-law. Wow. That immediately signals a very specific, intense kind of conflict, doesn't it?
It really does. A specific kind of warfare, you might say. And the source jumps right into a prime example. Gabrielle and Juanita, who's Carlos's mother,
Right.
it calls their dynamic the war for control of Carlos.
Yeah.
That phrase alone tells you the stakes are high, deeply personal, a real struggle for influence.
You can almost feel the tension building just from that description.
Yeah.
We learned this war started way back the night he proposed, and that Gabrielle had been losing ground to Juanita ever since. It mentions the prenup she had to sign, the wedding music she hated, the house paint color she didn't choose. Gabrielle had suffered one defeat after another. That phrase, losing ground, it's powerful.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Losing ground is a great idiom. It means you're losing advantage, position, maybe territory in a competition or struggle.
Like in a real battle.
Exactly. Like an army being pushed back, giving up land. They're literally losing ground. Now, Gabrielle isn't losing land, obviously, but she is losing influence, control. Her preferences are getting steamrolled.
It suggests this slow, steady erosion of her position.
Yeah, a weakening of her standing in this personal war.
Yeah.
And it's such a versatile phrase. You hear it in business all the time, right? The company is losing ground to its competitors.
Sure. Or the opposite, gaining ground.
Exactly. If they're gaining ground, they're becoming more successful, taking market share. So for Gabrielle, every compromise, every unwanted decision, it was a step back in her fight for control over her own life, her relationship.
And Juanita, portrayed as this seasoned fighter, she doesn't let up, does she? She starts suspecting Gabrielle's having an affair, which just escalates everything.
The source even says no prisoners would be taken.
That's pretty intense language for family dynamics.
It is. And Juanita's tactics are, well, there's something. She tries to get Carlos to fire their maid, Yao Lin, points out the cost, $15,000 a year.
Using money as a weapon. Right. She suggests Gabrielle should do the housework herself. Says things like, it's only called help when you do some of the work yourself, and other women manage. This is where she pushes Carlos to cut back on expenses.
Okay, cut back on expenses. That's a super common phrase, very practical. You hear it managing household budgets, running big companies.
It means spend less, basically.
Exactly. Reduce spending, save money, often because you need to, or you just want to be more frugal. But Juanita here, she uses it strategically. She frames her attack on Gabrielle's lifestyle choices in this language of financial responsibility. Appeals to Carlos's concerns about saving for retirement.
It's clever. Makes a personal criticism sound like sensible financial advice.
Very clever. And culturally, you picked up on this, it touches on perceptions of domestic help, right? And expectations of wives managing the household.
Yeah, in some circles, having help is normal. In others, it's a luxury, maybe even seen as lazy. Juanita's comment, other women manage, isn't just about the money.
No, it's a direct jab. It implies Gabrielle isn't measuring up to some standard for wives, suggests she's lazy or incompetent. It taps into those deeper societal expectations about a woman's role.
It's a multi-layered attack, for sure. But Gabrielle, she's quick. She has this brilliant counter move.
She does. She immediately pretends to be utterly exhausted by the idea of doing housework.
Right. Says she'll be exhausted at night, just like all the other wives.
Till I build up my stamina, of course, and that might take a couple of years. It's brilliant. She turns Juanita's argument completely on its head. Uses humor, a bit of passive aggression maybe.
She totally defends her ground, turns the implied weakness not doing housework into this long-term project that actually justifies keeping the maid.
And it works. Carlos backs down, the maid stays. And the source gives us this great line. Sadly for Juanita, she ignored the first rule of war. Never underestimate your enemy.
Ah, classic. Never underestimate your enemy.
It's such a timeless piece of advice. Goes way beyond actual war, doesn't it? It's a warning, basically.
Yeah.
Don't take your opponent lightly. Don't assume they're weaker or less smart or less capable than they really are.
Because they might surprise you.
Exactly. Juanita made a mistake. She didn't anticipate Gabrielle's wit, her speed, her ability to flip the script. This rule, it applies everywhere. Chess, business deals, legal fights, even just arguing with friends.
Yeah, always assume your opponent might be smarter or more cunning than you think. Be prepared.
So this whole domestic battleground scenario, it really shines a light on that universal human need for control, and how that need, if it gets out of hand, can turn even loving relationships into these quiet but devastating arenas of warfare.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Power dynamics aren't just for boardrooms, they're playing out in every living room. And the stakes are often much more personal, more emotional.
And our language reflects that competitive instinct even in these intimate spaces, which kind of naturally leads us into the next layer, secrets and investigations.
Perfect transition. Because when relationships become battles, information definitely becomes a weapon. Hidden truths become the targets.
Right. And the language shifts, you notice. It becomes about suspicion, pursuit. We follow characters who are driven to uncover what's hidden.
And the focus shifts particularly to Susan and her relentless quest to find out the truth about Mary Alice's suicide. The setting for the first clue is kind of interesting, a neighborhood yard sale.
Described as a cherished ritual.
Yeah, where shoppers often miss hidden treasures.
It's beautifully ironic, isn't it? Setting a mystery in motion at a yard sale.
It really is. A yard sale is all about what's out in the open, right? Things people are getting rid of. But the source immediately hints that their real treasures are hidden. Suggests deeper truths beneath the suburban surface.
Sets up that central irony perfectly. The mundane hiding the profound, the public concealing the private.
Exactly. And the first clue pops up when Susan sees Mary Alice's charity award for sale. That seems odd. Very odd. And Paul Young, Mary Alice's husband, his answers about their son Zach are incredibly vague. He's been a bit depressed. I send him to stay with relatives. You don't know them. Just shuts down the conversation.
Total evasion. Which brings us to a really useful phrase. Playing it close to the vest. Paul is definitely playing it close to the vest here.
Okay. Playing it close to the vest. Like holding your cards tight in poker.
Precisely where it comes from. Holding your cards close so no one sees your hand, your strategy. In everyday use, it means being secretive, cautious about your plans or feelings, not giving much away.
Like a CEO in a negotiation.
Perfect example. She played her cards close to the vest, giving away nothing about her bottom line. Paul knows Susan's digging, she's onto him, so he reveals the absolute minimum, safeguarding his secrets. It's deliberate withholding.
It captures that guarded behavior perfectly. And culturally. Well, it touches on that tricky balance in suburbs, right? Between being neighborly and fiercely guarding your privacy.
Yeah, there's often that facade of openness, friendly chats over the fence. But underneath, some doors stay firmly closed. An unspoken understanding that some things are just not shared.
That tension between appearance and reality is a constant theme.
Palpable. And it just fuels Susan's determination. She gets convinced Paul is deliberately hiding Zach and hiding the truth. She decides she needs to be evasive herself to find out what's going on.
We even see her trying to borrow a car with this flimsy excuse about a sick aunt. Shows she's willing to use a bit of deception for her cause. She becomes this sort of amateur detective.
Her usual openness gets compromised by this need for answers, and her desperation really comes through in her search for Zach. He eventually drops this bombshell clue, though it's cryptic. Mary Alice killed herself because of something he'd done.
Huge guilt there, and it just propels Susan forward. But when she asks her daughter, Julie, for help finding Zach, because Julie knows kids in those troubled circles, Julie's pretty skeptical.
Right, she's like, how can I blend in with messed up teenagers, pretend to be bulimic, gag a little, just total sarcasm.
And Susan, clearly at her wit's end, just snaps back. Okay, give me a break here. I'm just grasping at straws.
Grasping at straws. Another excellent idiom. It means you're in such a desperate spot, such a difficult situation, that you'll try absolutely anything, any solution, no matter how unlikely or impractical it seems.
Like someone drowning.
Exactly. Reaching out frantically for anything, even a fragile straw, to stay afloat. It signifies that last-ditch effort, born out of desperation, not logic.
Like applying for jobs you're totally unqualified for when you're desperate.
Perfect example. After losing his job, he was grasping at straws, applying for every opening imaginable.
Susan's comment here just highlights her worry, her exhaustion, and her willingness to try even absurd ideas to get to the truth.
It's such a vivid image for desperation, and despite it all, she does get a critical clue from Zach. At the treatment center, amidst all his confusion, he blurts out, "What happened to Dana? Dana? Who's Dana?"
And Susan instantly knows. Dana. That's a key. A hidden piece connecting to Mary Alice's past. The one thread she can follow in this whole tangled mystery. So it really raises that question, doesn't it? How do you pursue truth when people are deliberately hiding things, playing it close to the vest, when even those who know something struggle to say it?
Yeah, the language here just captures that tension so well. The hints, the evasions, the desperate attempts to piece together this puzzle from fragments.
It's a really compelling look at suspicion, pursuit, and that painstaking, often draining process of uncovering what's hidden right there in plain sight in a seemingly perfect community.
And from that individual quest for hidden truth, we kind of shift focus again, moving into the more public, but just as intense arena of social dynamics.
Right. The competitive world of parenting, community involvement, this is where those power plays and parenting politics really come alive.
Shows how seemingly small things can escalate into these significant social battles, often fought with words, subtle digs, manipulations,
People carving out their territory, their influence.
even if it's just on the bake sale committee. The stakes might look low from outside, but for the people involved, their social standing, maybe even their self-worth, feels like it's on the line.
And the perfect setting for this in our source is the Barcliff Academy play, Little Red Riding Hood, and the undisputed ruler of this little kingdom, Maisie Gibbons, the parent coordinator.
Ah, Maisie. The source says she loves to rule her little kingdom and hasn't changed since Girl Scouts.
That tells you a lot right there, doesn't it? Gives you a sense of her personality, someone who thrives on control, maybe a bit of micromanagement.
Absolutely. It implies this long-standing pattern ingrained since childhood of seeking authority in social groups. She's found her niche, the school play committee, and she wields her power there.
And she starts wielding it immediately during the script debate. Maisie decides that killing the wolf in the traditional story is troubled. Why? Because it sends the wrong message to the kids.
Oh boy. So what's her version?
Her revised version. The woodsman takes out a thorn from the wolf's paw and then sends Mr. Wolf on his way.
Sends him on his way. Actually eat grandma.
Exactly. Lynette Scavo, whose twins are playing oak trees, she's totally incredulous, asks Maisie, "You know that the wolf is a bad guy. He eats Little Red's grandma."
Right. Okay, let's look at that phrase. Sends the wrong message. Super common, isn't it? Especially when talking about PR or education, setting examples.
Yeah, it means an action or a statement might communicate something undesirable, unintended, or set a bad precedent.
Like ignoring safety rules sends the wrong message to employees about company priorities. Maisie here is worried about the moral lesson. She's shaping the story to fit her own ideas about what kids should learn.
And culturally, this taps right into ongoing debates about political correctness, right? Especially with kids' stories. Should we protect kids from disturbing themes or present stories as they were?
It's that tension. Do you allow for complexity, maybe even darkness, or do you sanitize things? Maisie clearly represents that impulse to soften narratives, fit them to a specific moral agenda, even if it guts the original story.
It's a small-scale example of a much bigger cultural argument about censorship and what's appropriate for kids.
It really is. So Lynette tries to push back, challenge Maisie.
But Maisie just shuts her down with that classic passive-aggressive line. "With all due respect, let's leave the creative suggestions to the mothers who have assumed the heavy lifting." Ouch.
That's a real put-down, thinly veiled, designed to put Lynette firmly in her place.
It's a total power move. And that phrase, heavy lifting, it's perfect for highlighting Maisie's strategy.
It is heavy lifting. It's an idiom, refers to the hardest part, the most significant or laborious bit of a task. Comes from actual physical work, right? Some people do the heavy lifting, others do lighter stuff.
So Maisie's saying she and her crew did all the real work.
Exactly. The planning, organizing, the actual effort for the play. Therefore, they've earned the right to make the decisions. Lynette, being new or less involved, hasn't done the heavy lifting, so her opinion doesn't carry the same weight.
Like in an office. Our small team did all the heavy lifting on the proposal, working late nights, while the bigger department just gave minor input. Conveys earned authority through effort.
Precisely. And after this public shutdown, Lynette feels totally alienated. Says, "Now no one on the play committee wants to talk to me."
Awkward. But then, an opportunity. A costume crisis. Celia Bond breaks her wrist. Suddenly they need a costume volunteer.
An opening.
Lynette jumps in, offers to do the costumes, hoping it'll give her the right to talk about the changes to the script. It's her way back in, trying to regain some standing.
Smart move. Trying to earn her way back into the power dynamic. But Maisie, she's always one step ahead, isn't she?
Seems like it. She retaliates, but passively. When Lynette forgets one tiny detail on a hunter's cap, the coonskin, Maisie uses it as an excuse to cut Lynette's sons, the oak trees, from the play.
No way. What's her reasoning?
She just says, that forest is looking a little dense anyway. It's so petty but effective, asserting dominance, punishing Lynette, all disguised as a creative choice.
Classic passive aggression. Using rules or power under the guise of practicality or art. And when Lynette confronts her,
Maisie just smiles smugly and says, well, crisis averted. As if Lynette forgetting the coonskin actually helped by giving Maisie the chance to cut the kids.
wow, crisis averted. Normally, that's said with relief, right? Like you dodged a bullet.
Yeah, phew, crisis averted. We fixed the leak before it flooded the place.
But Maisie uses it ironically.
Yeah.
Smugly. Rubs Lynette's face in it. Turns a common phrase into this little weapon of passive aggression. Adds insult to injury.
And this is what pushes Lynette over the edge. She just goes, okay, lady, that's it. Demands they take it outside, saying they're throwing down. Whoa.
Okay, throwing down. That's definitely informal, pretty aggressive slang.
Yeah.
It means you're challenging someone to a fight, or you're ready for a major confrontation. Often implies things might get physical, or at least very heated verbally.
Not messing around anymore.
Not at all. It conveys this readiness for a decisive, no-holds-barred fight. You might hear it about rival sports teams ready to throw down, or someone walking into a meeting ready to throw down over budget cuts. It's a declaration of war, basically.
And Lynette's reason for wanting this public showdown is so relatable, isn't it? For anyone who's dealt with competitive social groups, she says, isn't it better to settle this rather than endure all this alpha mom crap until our kids graduate? That phrase, alpha mom crap.
Oh yeah, that resonates. Alpha mom crap.
It's informal, a bit derogatory. Refers to that competitive, dominant, often really petty behavior you see sometimes. Mothers trying to assert superiority in parenting, community roles, whatever.
Jockeying for position.
Exactly. The constant trying to be the leader of the pack. It captures the frustration with those exhausting, unwritten rules of social hierarchy among parents. Lynette's just had enough of the crap.
What's so fascinating here is how this seemingly trivial school play stuff becomes this proxy, this stand-in for much deeper power struggles. Totally. And the language reflects it perfectly. You get childishly petty terms like alpha mom crap and then aggressively confrontational slang like throwing down.
Shows that even in supposedly calm suburbia, the fight for social dominance can be fierce. The stakes feel incredibly high to the people involved. Turns a community event into this battleground for ego and control.
Indeed. And from those very public battles, we transition now into the deeply private realm. Marriage. Intimacy, where communication itself can become a silent battleground.
Right. This segment delves into marital intimacy and hidden desires, using Bree and Rex's story to explore these profound communication breakdowns and unspoken needs.
And their therapy sessions lay it bare right away. There's this stark disconnect. Rex tells the therapist he's really unhappy with her sex life.
Yeah, he feels Bree is not as connected as you could be, says she's thinking about other things. He puts it bluntly, you're just not there. Paints a picture of real absence.
Not there. It's colloquial, but really powerful, isn't it? I mean, someone's mentally checked out, unfocused, emotionally disengaged, even if they're physically present, a profound lack of connection.
And disconnect is the broader term for that lack of connection or understanding.
Exactly. It often leads to communication breakdown, intimacy issues. Rex feels this disconnect because Bree is emotionally not there during intimate moments. And the therapist points out, this kind of disconnect is often a symptom of a deeper problem.
Suggests it goes way beyond just the physical side. Points to a deep emotional distance.
And the therapist proposed solution. Well, it's pretty shocking, especially for a couple like Bree and Rex, so outwardly conventional, a sexual surrogate.
Whoa, how does Rex explain that?
He calls it a licensed professional who'd work with you as a couple, apparently discreetly in the room to help them achieve maximum sexual potential.
Okay, a sexual surrogate. That's a very specific term.
It is. It's a professional who works with people on sexual issues, often involving hands-on experience and coaching, usually guided by a therapist. It involves physical interaction to help clients overcome inhibitions or learn new ways to connect intimately.
The fact that this is even suggested for Bree and Rex, it really highlights how severe their problems are, doesn't it? And how desperate Rex is for a solution.
Totally shatters that facade of their perfect life, shows the depth of the issue, the unconventional lengths he's considering.
And Bree's reaction, it's classic Bree, shock, indignation.
She immediately hits back with, how much longer is your midlife crisis going to last? Because it is really starting to tick me off. That phrase, tick me off, it's so common, perfectly captures her irritation.
Tick me off. Very informal American English, just means annoy, irritate, make someone angry.
Yeah, everyday frustration, mild anger, like his constant complaining really ticks me off. Bree uses it to dismiss Rex's deep unhappiness. It's just his problem, his midlife crisis, not their problem.
She's downplaying his pain, really.
Definitely. And the scene then shifts to this motel confrontation. Bree makes this incredibly bold, almost desperate move.
Shows up at Rex's motel room looking amazing, clearly expecting intimacy, trying to fix things physically.
She's putting herself out there totally vulnerable, hoping he'll notice, hoping for connection, which makes his rejection absolutely brutal.
He initially makes this lame excuse about a cheese stain on the carpet.
Yeah, then finally admits, now is not really a good time for me, after she's made herself so vulnerable, sought intimacy so directly. It's devastating for her. Undermines her self-worth, confirms her worst fears.
Absolutely, and her anger just boils over. You humiliated me. Normal men don't say no to that. She realizes the disconnect is coming from him.
So she makes this desperate plea, right? Willing to do anything, whatever you want. I will go there with you. You just have to say it out loud. She needs him to articulate his desires. She's offering to meet him halfway.
But his response, it's just brutal. A complete rejection of her vulnerability, her offer. I need for you to stop talking like this. You sound like a whore.
Oh, that dialogue is just raw. Shows how fractured they are. And using the word whore, that's such a deeply offensive, culturally loaded insult in English.
Especially in this context.
Exactly. It's a derogatory term for a prostitute. But here, it's meant purely to degrade and shame Bree. Implying her directness about sex, her willingness to please him, makes her somehow morally loose, undignified.
It's a weaponized word, designed to inflict maximum pain, especially given Bree's conservative nature, her concern for propriety.
It really highlights how emotionally charged language becomes a weapon when vulnerability is rejected, when communication completely breaks down, reveals this deep-seated contempt, maybe?
It's a total gut punch, and Bree's comeback, born from her own pain, is powerful too. No, I sound like a woman whose husband won't touch her.
Mm-hmm. Then she pleads for honesty. We all have our secrets. I think it's time for you to tell me yours.
This whole segment just powerfully illustrates how unspoken desires, hidden issues, resentments, they just erode intimacy. The dialogue's raw, revealing, shows communication breaking down, words becoming weapons.
The real insight, maybe, is how silence, withheld truths, can be way more destructive than any spoken argument.
Yeah, intimacy isn't just physical. It needs emotional honesty, shared vulnerability, clearly missing there.
And this whole idea of secrets, what we hide, how the alliances we form leads us perfectly into our final segment.
Deception and unexpected alliances, where characters navigate this world where what you see isn't always real and loyalties can shift dramatically.
Exactly. Moving fully into hidden truths, strategic moves, starting with the big reveal, Juanita's gambling problem.
Right. Carlos reveals his mother had a serious gambling problem before. Went into debt, dipped into savings, was hawking jewelry.
Hawking jewelry, meaning pawning it, selling it for quick cash. This revelation adds a whole new dimension to Juanita, doesn't it? Shows this hidden vulnerability in someone we saw mainly as controlling.
Definitely. And Carlos adds, it doesn't take much for her to fall off the wagon. Fall off the wagon, another great idiom.
Very common. Means reverting to an old bad habit, especially drinking or gambling after you'd stopped for a while. Implies a struggle, maybe addiction, a pattern that's easily triggered again.
Like, he'd been sober a year but fell off the wagon last night. Paints a picture of a chronic issue.
Exactly. Not just a one-off mistake. Carlos also calls his mother quite the card shark.
Okay, card shark, informal term for someone really skilled at cards, right?
Yeah.
Especially playing to win money. Sometimes implies they might cheat or take advantage.
Yeah, suggests someone cunning, strategic, maybe a bit manipulative, always looking for an edge. Fits Juanita perfectly, both at the card table and in her family fights.
Absolutely, and the current incident confirms it. Juanita loses big gambling, maxes out Carlos's credit card, a $15,000 credit limit.
Wow. Which puts Gabrielle in a really tricky spot. Does she expose Juanita? Or protect her? And by doing that, protect Carlos from his mom's habit.
The conflict is immediate. Gabrielle initially wants Juanita gone. Says things like, why haven't you returned my calls? I've seen who you've been busy with. But then, Juanita threatens to tell Carlos about Gabrielle's own affair.
The stakes get even higher.
And Gabrielle has this moment of clarity. No matter how much I dislike you, I love Carlos more. Leads to this surprising pragmatic alliance.
What do you do?
Offers to cover for Juanita. I'll sell some jewelry, pay off the card, and Carlos will never find out.
Wow. A total truce born out of shared self-interest. And for Gabrielle, that deeper loyalty to Carlos. And there's another great phrase in that exchange, capturing Gabrielle's initial defiance.
Oh, yeah.
When Juanita first threatens her, Gabrielle snaps back, "Fine, to heck with it. I'm not going to risk my neck to protect you. I'm calling Carlos. To heck with it."
To heck with it. Informal, kind of defiant, like you're giving up being cautious or polite, just doing what you want, consequences be damned.
Exactly.
Huh.
Expresses frustration, exasperation. Like, "I've tried fixing this computer, but to heck with it, I'm buying a new one." Shows Gabrielle's initial anger before she makes the strategic shift.
It's that resignation mixed with a challenge. I'm done playing nice. And the source nails it. Juanita might have been the gambler of the family, but Gabrielle was the one who knew how to bluff. Crucial distinction.
Bluff. Straight from poker. Means pretending to have something you don't like a good hand or pretending you'll do something you won't.
So Gabrielle pretends she'll expose Juanita.
Exactly. She has no intention of hurting Carlos that way. But she uses the threat as a bargaining chip. And it works. Juanita backs down, accepts Gabrielle's terms. It's a masterful bluff. Shows Gabrielle's sharp mind, her willingness to play the game.
Like a company bluffing in negotiations by threatening to walk away, but the other side calls their bluff. Gabrielle's bluff here saves them both and cements this temporary, weird alliance.
Brilliant navigation of a tricky situation. This alliance, born of secrets and necessity, it really shows the complex moral landscape. And speaking of deception, we also see it with the teenagers.
Right, Danielle and John, the gardener, their little upstairs studying routine.
While Bree, bless her heart, believes them, especially since Danielle's in the abstinence club. A bit naive, maybe sees what she wants to see.
But Gabrielle, the pragmatist, the expert in hidden truths. She knows what's up. She warns John, half joking, half threatening, I can do things to you she can't even pronounce.
And then, to protect her own affair, she subtly misdirects Carlos's suspicions. Tells him, essentially, a guy she talks to in public isn't someone you're going to worry about.
Clever. Makes Carlos suspicious of someone she doesn't talk to openly. Diverts attention right away from John, who's right there under his nose. Masterful misdirection. Plays on Carlos's assumptions.
Total sleight of hand. And she uses that phrase, stepping out on someone, too. When Carlos asks if she's cheating, prompted by his mom, Gabrielle emphatically denies it. She's not stepping out on you.
Stepping out on someone. Informal idiom just means being unfaithful. Right. Having an affair.
Yep. Seeing someone secretly outside the relationship. Very common, direct way to talk about infidelity without being too graphic. Gabrielle uses it to deny the accusation while simultaneously pulling off her misdirection.
And finally, when John and Gabrielle are caught together by a shocked breaker. Gabrielle, always practical, tells John, maybe we should just cool it for a while.
Cool it. Another good informal phrase. Means calm down, reduce the intensity, or just stop doing something for a bit.
Like put the brakes on.
Yeah. In this context, put a temporary stop to their secret relationship, or at least be less obvious to avoid getting caught again. Often used to tell someone to relax or pause a risky situation, like police telling people arguing to cool it. Quick, direct way to signal a necessary retreat.
This whole section just hammers home how much of life in this community is perception versus reality. People constantly managing appearances, deceiving, creating diversions.
It's this complex dance. Love, loyalty, self-interest, all tangled up. And language itself becomes this crucial tool for manipulation, for revelation.
Really makes you think about reading between the lines. Not just what's said, but what's not said, and why.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And this rich vocabulary we've dug into today, from losing ground and playing it close to the vest to throwing down and bluffing, it's not just about following the plot twists.
No, it's about gaining deeper insight.
Right, into human nature, social dynamics, those unspoken cultural nuances shaping how we interact. You've now got these new tools, this language, to describe conflict, navigate deception, understand those subtle power plays in your own life.
Gives you a bit of an edge in deciphering the human experience, maybe.
I think so.
So what's the big takeaway for us? Maybe it's not just that the lines between good and evil or right and wrong get blurry in the domestic sphere. Maybe it's that the carefully built facade of peace in suburbia actually needs this constant hidden battle to maintain itself.
Interesting, like a tension between the aspiration, the perfect image, and the messy reality.
Exactly. And maybe the fight for perceived perfection ends up being the most exhausting conflict of all. It suggests that the most ordinary-looking places can hide these extraordinary lessons. if you know where to look,
Yeah.
and crucially, how to listen to the language of human behavior.
Which brings up a final thought, maybe a question for you, our listener. How much of your own life, when you really look at it, involves these kinds of domestic combats and bluffs, played out not on some dramatic TV battlefield, but maybe in your home, your workplace, your community? And what new treasures, insights, understandings might you discover about yourself or the people around you now that you're maybe a bit better equipped to read between the lines and understand the rich, revealing language we use to navigate it all?